Module 5. Bilateral Agencies and Development Finance Institutions. How a provider is organized, the agencies of each region, and what tied aid means for who is even allowed to bid. Most established providers split development work across up to 4 bodies, and once you see the pattern, the whole map becomes readable. A ministry sets policy and holds the budget. A technical cooperation agency delivers advice, training, and institutional strengthening, people rather than capital. A development bank provides financial cooperation, concessional loans, and capital grants that build the infrastructure. And a development finance institution invests in private companies on commercial or near-commercial terms. Germany is the clearest example. BMZ is the ministry. GIZ delivers technical cooperation. KfW Development Bank provides financial cooperation. DEG is the DFI. France runs the same shape differently. AFD as the main agency, Proparco as the private sector arm, and Expertise France for technical assistance, all within the AFD group. Here is why it matters to you. Technical cooperation is largely consulting work. Financial cooperation builds things and generates design and supervision work. Which of the two funds an assignment tells you what kind of expert it will hire? North America first, because it is the most unsettled. USAID was for decades the largest bilateral aid agency in the world. Its independent operations ended on the 1st of July 2025, and remaining programs were absorbed into the Department of State. This is the single most consequential structural change in the sector in a generation, and it is still settling. Treat any organization chart, funding line, or procurement channel involving U.S. assistance as unverified until you check it against current official sources. The Millennium Challenge Corporation, which signs large, time-limited compacts with countries meeting governance criteria, the Development Finance Corporation, the U.S. DFI, and the Export-Import Bank of the United States operate under their own authorities and their own trajectories. Canada is simpler. Global Affairs Canada delivers the aid program, FinDev Canada is the DFI. Europe holds the greatest density of providers. The United Kingdom, DFID, was merged into the Foreign Office in 2020 to create the FCDO. British International Investment, formerly CDC Group, is the DFI. Germany, BMZ, GIZ, KfW, and DEG, as we just saw. German cooperation has an unusually wide country footprint, and GIZ is one of the largest single employers of development consultants in the world, contracting through framework agreements as well as individual assignments. France, AFD, Proparco, Expertise France. The European Union is one of the largest development financiers in the world and behaves like a very large bilateral. DGINTPA handles international partnerships globally. DGNEAR handles the neighborhood and enlargement countries. ECHO handles humanitarian aid. EU delegations in each country manage programming and contracting on the ground. Global Gateway is the current infrastructure strategy, and Team Europe is the label for joint programming by the Commission, member states, the EIB, and the EBRD-EU. External action procurement runs on its own rulebook, the Practical Guide, universally called PRAG. The Netherlands funds through its foreign ministry, with FMO as DFI and SNV as a major implementing organization. The Nordics, SIDA with Swedfund, NORAD with Norfund, Danida with IFU, and Finland's foreign ministry with Finfund. Switzerland runs 2 arms, SDC for development cooperation and SECO for economic cooperation, with SIFOM as DFI, Southern Europe, AICS in Italy, AECID in Spain, Enable in Belgium, the Austrian Development Agency, COMOS in Portugal, and Irish Aid. The European DFIs coordinate through EDFI and co-invest constantly with each other and with IFC. 4 Asia-Pacific providers matter. Japan, JICA delivers grants, technical cooperation, and ODA loans, the concessional yen loans that finance large infrastructure across Asia and Africa. JBIC handles commercially oriented finance outside ODA, and NEXI provides export and investment insurance. Korea, KOICA delivers grants and technical cooperation. The Economic Development Cooperation Fund, managed by the Export-Import Bank of Korea, provides concessional loans. Australia. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade runs the program, with the Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility for the Pacific for infrastructure lending. Australia is the dominant bilateral presence in the Pacific, and New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade also focused on the Pacific. Providers outside the Development Assistance Committee operate on different rules, and you will encounter them. China is the largest. Aid coordination sits with CIDCA, the China International Development Cooperation Agency, but the financing muscle is in two policy banks: the Export-Import Bank of China, which extends concessional and preferential export buyers' credits, and China Development Bank, which lends at larger scale on commercial terms. Most Chinese-financed infrastructure is delivered by Chinese contractors and designers under the financing terms, so the consulting entry points for others are narrower. They sit mainly on the host government side, as owner's engineer, supervision, environmental and social work, and debt or contract advisory. India provides technical cooperation and training through the Ministry of External Affairs, with the Development Partnership Administration coordinating and concessional lines of credit extended through the Export-Import Bank of India, concentrated in Africa and South Asia. Türkiye works through TIKA Brazil through the Brazilian Cooperation Agency. Gulf providers were covered in Module 4. Saudi Arabia also runs KS Relief for humanitarian work. Thailand, Indonesia and others operate smaller South-South agencies. Now the fact that decides whether you can bid at all. Tied aid requires that goods, works, and services be procured from the provider country. Partially, tied aid restricts eligibility to a defined group of countries. Untied aid is open to international competition. Committee members have committed to untying much of their aid, particularly to the least developed countries, but tying persists in practice through formal restrictions, through technical specifications that favor national suppliers, through language requirements, and through concessional export credits that are tied by design. Before spending time on a bilateral opportunity, check the nationality eligibility rule in the notice. 3 things follow about bilateral work generally. Compared with the banks, bilateral providers lean more towards grants and technical assistance, which means more consulting content per dollar. They contract more directly. The agency is often your client, not a borrowing government, and they use framework agreements heavily. The cost is volatility. An election, a budget vote, or a machinery of government change can end a country program with little notice. Before you rely on any of this, check the source. Bilateral structures, mandates, budgets, country programs, and procurement channels change with elections and legislation. Check the agency's own site and its current country strategy, and confirm that a program is both appropriated and active before building work around it. For U.S. assistance in particular, verify the responsible entity and the contracting vehicle for every opportunity. In summary, the standard structure is Ministry, Technical Cooperation Agency, Development Bank, and DFI, Germany's BMZ, GIZ, KfW, and DEG being the model. Europe holds the greatest density of providers. Japan and Korea are the large Asian ones. Australia dominates the Pacific. China, India, Türkiye, and the Gulf operate outside the committee framework on different rules. Technical cooperation is consulting intensive, financial cooperation builds things, and tied aid decides who is allowed to bid, which is the first thing to check. Next, the United Nations system, vertical funds, NGOs, and foundations.